All right, so I'm really hopeful that our calendar is going to stay up here because it's a little bit precarious. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to talk to you about two really easy things that you can do when you are lesson planning for the school year ahead. That's going to help really just kind of make the kind of whole batch planning world make a little bit more sense to you. Take one unit as an example to kind of walk you through this. So the first thing that we want to do is we really want to nail down the cadence, the scope of our big main units. So I'm going to start by talking about September with my House on Mango Street unit. So let's just say, these are the dates, whatever. And I know that my House on Mango Street unit is going to take me about 3 weeks, but I'm going to give myself a couple extra days just in case. So what I'll do is I'll put on my calendar, just kind of like if I was going on vacation. This is what I do with my family calendar when I go on vacation somewhere. I'm essentially just kind of writing out the cadence that the House on Mango Street unit, House on Mango Street, is gonna take me these kind of 3.5 weeks of time, right? And what's helpful about this is that when I then go to plan my next unit, I can do the same exact thing, right? I know House on Mango Street ends on this day. And on these 2 days, I might make space for, some sort of other activity. Maybe we won't dive into a novel on Thursday, Friday, etc. But when we come back, I might start, my Outsiders unit or something like that, okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm really creating like a very high level structure cadence of how I'm gonna implement all of the lessons, activities, units, things like that within my particular year, right? And I'm seeing it on a calendar. When I was in college, they taught us to put it on, I don't even know, it was like units and days, and it was never transcribed into a calendar, and it made 0 sense. We got to put it on a calendar. This makes sense, right? Okay, so that's the very first thing, is like the high level overview of the cadence of the time that I'm going to spend on any given unit. And you can do this through the entire school year without getting into the nitty gritty and the granular of your actual lesson plans. Okay. So now that I know I'm starting House on Mango Street on this day, I'm going to dedicate about 15, 16, 17, 18 class periods to this particular unit. And if you're using, if you're an EB Teachers Club member, you're using one of our units, we give you an idea of how long our units take, given like a 60-minute class period or something like that. So knowing that information, now I'm going to go a little bit more granularly. So here I'll use this part of the calendar as an example. So we're going to pretend like this is September, just at a different view, right? A different glance, okay? So we'll put these dates here just so that we have something to ground us. So here I know on this day, I'm going to introduce the House on Mango Street unit, okay? And at EB, what we teach our teachers is to follow what we call an into, through, and beyond lesson planning structure. Okay, and this is something we go into detail in our EB Teachers Club at our Batch Planning Live event. We have some blog posts about it too, podcast episodes. If you just go to our website and you type in EB Lesson Planning Approach, you'll find more information on that. But I know that an into lesson is going to take me about 2 days. So I'm going to set aside 1 to 2 days. It depends on the length of your class periods. I'm going to set aside this part of my House on Mango Street unit that I've mapped out as the introductory or into lessons for this particular unit, okay? Then I also know that the beyond is going to take me about 1 to 2 days as well. And I'm going to put those down here as, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are my Mango beyond days. So this might be where I'm doing, oh, I put it in the wrong spot. Sorry, pretend like this is up here. This might be where I'm doing an in-class essay, or I'm actually having students complete an end of the unit assessment, or maybe they're presenting their projects that they've completed for this particular activity or whatever it might be. So that's about 2 to 3 days, 1 to 2, 2 to 3 days, depending on how much time you have in your class period and what you're actually having your students complete. But then I know that all of these days within here, these are the days where I'm filling in these through activities, right? This is where I'm thinking about, what do I want my students to learn from this particular unit, right? And that's where, like we talked about in one of our past YouTube videos a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of June, when that aired, was we talked about using the standards as your guide, okay? And because I know when I'm teaching House on Mango Street, I want to talk about reading or I want to teach my students reading for literature standards. I want to also talk about narrative writing standards within this particular activity. So I'm going to have those standards in my mind when I'm thinking about, well, what particular activities am I going to do on these days within this particular unit? Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to just read. I don't want to just read and discuss. 100% we should be doing that. Absolutely all day, every day. But I don't want to just be doing that. I also want to be very strategically and intentionally incorporating specific standards that I want my students to start to learn, to start to perhaps master throughout the course of this unit over these particular through lessons. And that's where, like we talked about in one of the other YouTube videos this month, is where it's really important to choose resources from the same person or from the same place, right? Because if you are an EB teacher, if you've utilized one of our units, you know we follow this framework when we create our lessons, right? That's what our curriculum team does, is we are very aware of this particular structure of our EB lesson planning approach. So then you know, okay, they've used the standards as the guide, and I know that I'm teaching these through lessons that are going to help me meet these particular standards, right? But if you're coming up with this on your own, these might be things like we read together and then we have a class discussion with like a silent debate, or maybe we're doing a Socratic seminar or something like that. Then we read again and perhaps we get into certain parts of the text where we're going to do characterization, or we're going to talk about plot, or whatever it might be. But that's where these days that are your through lessons really, I mean, if we're talking about lesson planning being challenging, that's where it's difficult, right? That's where it gets difficult, is in these through lessons. What are we actually doing here? And when we use the standards as our guide and we have these front and center in our mind, it makes it a lot easier to choose what particular activities we are then placing into these through lessons. So hopefully that helps in lesson planning for you, but you're thinking about, first step is, what's the cadence? How long is that going to take you? And you can do your whole year for all of your novel units if you wanted to. And then you're breaking it down into the into, through, and beyond approach on a more granular level for that particular lesson, or that particular unit rather. Okay, so hopefully this helped. If you enjoyed this, make sure that you hit subscribe where you're watching this video. And if you also found it helpful, we would love for you to share it with another middle school ELA teacher.